recording. All right. So, hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. With me today are Robert Laplander and Alexander Curran, two members of the Doughboy MIA team, amongst other hats they wear. So this is a quick episode that we have put together to talk about our recent trip to France and a couple of the reasons behind it. You folks know who I am already, and I will let these gentlemen introduce themselves. Rob and Alex, welcome to the show. And Rob, if you would go ahead and just start us off, you've been on the show a couple of times already at this point, but can you go ahead and introduce yourself again?
Robert Laplander, most people know me as that Lost Battalion guy. Wrote the books on the Lost Battalion. We lead tours, Mike and I together, of the Muse Argonne with a special emphasis on what happened in the 77th Division. I'm also the managing director of Doughboy MIA, which we'll talk about in just a moment.
All right. Alex?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexander Curran. I've always had a huge interest in history, especially military history. That came along from my grandfather, who was in the Second World War over in the Pacific. It wasn't until a few years before the centennial where I really got a huge interest in the First World War. And then from there, it began into collecting all sorts of different things. I love research, so it's right up my alley. And also, missing service members have a huge piece of my heart. So everything kind of fell together. I'm the newest member of Doughboy MIA, and I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to all the great things that are currently happening and will be happening, the upcoming year and beyond.
Cool. Awesome. So there's a lot of talk about Doughboy MIA. Folks who follow the podcast, you may have seen some posts on Facebook just related to it. So this was the trip's main objective, was a little bit of a recon for Doughboy MIA. So Rob, if you would, can you tell us a little bit about Doughboy MIA and what we're trying to accomplish here?
Doughboy originally started around 2005 or 2006, when my wife and I got interested in trying to find one of the missing in action soldiers from the Lost Battalion. And that blossomed into the discovery that there are still 4,423 missing Americans in World War I. And we decided we wanted to find out what happened to some of these guys, and if there would be a possibility of using today's technology to go out and try to find them. Between 1919 and 1934, the Graves Registration Service went to great lengths to try to find the missing in action and identify sets of remains, largely to no avail. They did a great job with what they had, but by 1930, they decided they were going to start closing cases, and they systematically closed all the cases between then and 1934. They took one last look, but with no other options, there was nothing they could do. So they closed the cases, and nobody's looked at them since then. Of course, now we have better technology. The computer has made it easier for us to find information, to collate information, and to try to tie the ends together and the pieces together, whereas they did everything with paper forms and shoeboxes full of index cards. So the team came together in 2015 at the suggestion of Chris Christopher, who works with the U.S. World War I Centennial Commission. They took us on as an official sponsor, official partner, and put up the website. And ever since then, we've been gathering team members like young Alex here, who is one of the latest team members to join. We do a lot of research. It's not just about finding the guys. It's also about telling their stories, what happened to the individuals. Our motto is, a man is only missing if he's forgotten. And our job is to keep them being forgotten. The side bonus is, if we can go over and we can find somebody and bring them home, so much the better. We're fond of saying that killed in action is, it's a fact. It's definite. It's incontrovertible. Whereas missing is a cruel hope that floats above a sea of despondency, threatening to sink at any time, and it never does. All these families died without ever knowing what happened to their loved one. And in many cases, that carried over to today's generation. Those families are still feeling it, even 103 years later. So that's what we do. We try to bring a little closure if we can and keep their memories from being forgotten.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So the three of us here, we're part of Doughboy MIA. We have other members as well, and the mission is to give an accounting for these boys who were part of the AEF, who went over in 1917 and 1918. And just like Rob says, if we can initiate a recovery, we certainly will. But our big mission is to account for them, just to tell their story, so that they can continue remaining present in our memory.
I mean, they're still relevant individuals, just because they've been gone this long. And we all know that World War I is kind of a forgotten war. And because of that, these guys particularly were forgotten. We all know about, the POW MIA organizations, primarily because of the work that they did with Vietnam. Most don't realize that there are over 85,000 still missing in action from America's wars from World War I on up. And we're the only organization that actually looks for the U.S. missing in action from World War I. So there's many World War II groups and a few Korean War groups, a lot of Vietnam groups. We're the only ones that do World War I.
Yeah. Alex, you have a personal connection to this mission, to this endeavor here. Can you tell us a little bit about the case you have worked on for Doughboy MIA?
Of course, there's one case that stands out to me. It's very special for me, and that's the case of Sergeant John Curran. Sergeant Curran is my great-granduncle. His case is a little different from others for the fact that he was actually captured, wounded by the Germans, and buried by the Germans. And after the war, the Graves Registration Service could not locate this grave. So based off of research and facts that we currently have, it's possible that he may still be in this same exact spot where the Germans placed him. So during our trip, we got to have a good meeting with the town council regarding Sergeant Curran. We were able to present the case to them, inform them, of what we intend to do if possible. And yeah, it was it's a great experience to be able to work on a case of a family member. It's very touching, especially to learn so much, about someone in my family and the experiences that they had. We'll never be able to truly understand what they experienced, but to be able to work and try to get to that point. I want to know as much as I can. I think the personal stories are amazing for me, but to solely work on a case regarding a family member it's fantastic for me. So it's very touching.
Yeah. And what are some of the details of Sergeant Curran?
Okay, yeah. So Sergeant Curran was in the 316th Infantry Regiment. Early in November, the 316th Infantry were engaged in heavy fighting just north of Mulville Farm. Just, I want to say it's a little bit east of Sivry-sur-Meuse. There's a huge hill. It's Hill 378. That was the main objective for November 4th, 1918. The Germans fortified this hill. If the Germans were, stayed put on this hill, they could look across the entire Meuse Valley and direct precise artillery on the AEF. So it was very important to capture this hill. The 316th took about 825 casualties in 3 days trying to gain this hill. At some point during the fighting, on November 4th, Sergeant Curran had been wounded reportedly by machine gun bullets. And also he had been captured, within November 4th at this battle. There were about 51 other Americans captured on this hill. And as a side project, I've been putting together a list of, all these other service members that were captured on this hill. But the story of Sergeant Curran is there's lots of twists and turns. Some things we don't know yet, some things we may never know. But he was wounded by machine gun bullets, captured by the Germans, and taken to a German field hospital, where 3 days later he unfortunately died of wounds.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, folks, if you're not too familiar with the Meuse Argonne, Civry-sur-Meuse, the village that Alex mentions, and Moleville Farm, those are on the what we call the east bank or the right bank of the Meuse River. So that was later on in the American Meuse Argonne offensive. So if you just go to Google Maps, focus on Verdun, and just look north, you'll find Civry-sur-Meuse and then Moleville Farm. And so you're talking like late November, late in the war, like November 6th, 7th timeframe. 79th Division was back in action. Now, Hill 378, is that the Cornwilly Hill?
Cornwilly Hill, yes. There's the French called it, excuse my French language, they called it Le Bourne du Cornelier.
Okay.
Of course, your average American can't pronounce this.
Yeah.
So the Doughboys started to call it Cornwilly Hill. But officially it's Hill 378.
Hill 378. Yeah, excellent. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So let's see here. So yeah, so part of our trip, was initiating contact with some local French officials in regards to some cases, Sergeant Curran's case being one. And if you were watching the video version of this on the quite neglected YouTube channel for this podcast, if you look over Alex's right shoulder is Sergeant John Curran right there. So it's fantastic.
Photo here, it might be a little easier to see.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, young man, right? So
Yes.
this brings it very much alive for us, especially to have an ancestor, a relative here, working on the case in a personal connection. So this is fantastic. Yeah, so this is what we've been working on. With just making contact with folks, and we hope to continue the mission. Ideally, I don't know about you guys, but I'm already fiendishly plotting for next summer, so I'm saving my pennies. So
yeah. As soon as the dust settles a little and we've added up the receipts and all that to find out what's left in the coffers for Doughboy MIA, there'll be another Zoom call out where we start begging for money again. Folks, remember that we are an all volunteer organization. Nobody's paid for any of this, and everything we do is through public subscription. We don't take any government funding.
Yep.
We are looking at some grants, but that's kind of stuff takes a long time to come in. In the meantime, in order to make ourselves move forward, we put our hand out and ask a lot. Our big campaign has always been called 10 for them. We asked for $10, and who can't give $10? I mean, so we've done it $10 at a time, and a couple of, really nice donations is what paid for the trip, would put us over there and gave us the chance to walk the ground on several of the cases, take a look, meet the French officials. We put about 7 miles a day walking on, and this is the very first trip that we've gone over that no one came home losing weight, because the French fed us, and they fed us really well everywhere we went. So
yeah, there was a couple of minimum like 8,000 calorie days. So yeah.
Usually I come home, I've dropped at least 2 inches off my waist and a good 10 or 15 pounds. Not this time. So
yeah.
And as Alex will attest, he found out everywhere we fought uphill. So
yes, it is definitely, I always read about the terrain that, our Doughboys were fighting against, but to finally be there and to walk that terrain was like, it was incredible for me, especially being from Florida. We're a very flat state. We don't have hills, we don't have mountains, and here I am in France, and I'm trekking up, hills, and it was tough, but it was very well worth it.
Yeah, and I also have to say that I'm just a little early, but like we may as well launch ourselves into the Argonne. The weather held out just long enough for us to get out into the Argonne, and then it turned into pretty much exactly what the Doughboys faced. So I think, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, or Alex here. So the Meuse-Argonne offensive was 47 days, I believe. Did it not rain for about 43 of them?
It rained almost every day it started to rain that year, about September 16th, and it rained virtually every day somewhere along the front, right up till the end of the war.
Yeah,
it was unbelievably miserable. It was also very unseasonably cold. I've had a couple of conversations with some guys in the past about doing a meteorological assessment of what all that shell fire and the smoke and all that from the battlefront did to the air in that area. Maybe that had something to do with creating a little bit of a different shift in the weather patterns. And one guy was very interested in it. I don't know if he ever followed up on it, but I think somebody could probably put together a really good thesis on that.
Yeah, that's certainly not my area. Yeah, so we got out there, and man, so Friday, the day after Thanksgiving here in the United States, we took a very special walk through the woods, and it was exactly as pretty what I always imagined how the Doughboys would have faced it. It was gray, it rained, and it stopped. It stopped long enough for us to take a walk through the woods. Then it picked up again, and it was raw, just a raw, cold day where you actually wanted to move so that you could warm up. So that, I mean, that was always an experience. And I think it was, Rob, you said it yourself, like, oh yeah, like this is an Argonne day.
It's an Argonne day, and there was plenty of mud.
Yeah,
Good mud sticking to the bottom of your shoes. And I know a couple of you guys, when we were on the walk in that ravine, decided let's run up the hill and take a look at some positions up above. And it's a trek to get up the hill to begin with, but to do it on a day like that, and then like Alexander said, now picture doing it with a load of ammunition, a pack on your back. You're sick, you're tired, you haven't had enough to eat or drink for a week, and this is what you get. This is a taste of what they went through.
Yeah. So the hill Rob is talking about is Hill 205, which is, if you've listened to the Lost Battalion episodes on the podcast, Hill 205 is very prevalent in those episodes. So it's at the junction of the Argonne Ravine, the Ravin d'Argonne, with the Charlevoix Ravine, and that's one of the hills that the Germans held and just raised all sorts of hell for the 308th Infantry Regiment and the 77th Division. So Alex, you went up that hill, yes?
Yeah, I didn't think I was gonna make it up. I finally made it up, and then on my way down, I didn't think I was gonna make it down. So just to be able to go up that hill was hard enough, but then just to picture yourself, now you're in war.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
It's definitely hard to imagine. And I feel the weather that day definitely set a mood. But it was a tough hike up the hill, but I'm glad I got to do it. It was a great experience.
Yeah. 60-degree slope, folks. We're lucky, I mean, the ground was covered in leaves. Everything was wet, so it made for a pretty slippery uphill climb. But I want you guys here and listeners to know, like, this is not bragging, but I work out like 3-4 times a week in the regular course of my week. But just going up that hill, like, I felt my heart was about to explode. So like, that's such a, like,
I second that.
Yeah, man, like I was actually like concerned because my daughter was with me, and I was like, man, it's gonna really ruin the trip if I have a heart attack right here on top of this hill. So like, it was,
There's an awful lot of paperwork involved in that. I'm glad it didn't happen.
yeah, and how quickly can an ambulance get out to the middle of the woods? You know, because I was
yeah, you're looking at least an hour.
yeah, I was dying, man.
At least.
Yeah, Mike, can you hang on for an hour? You
know? No. So that's the kind of experience it was. And I mean, just as Alex said, like we were doing it in peacetime, you know, no pack, no rifle in your hands, not getting shot at. And it was still really, really difficult. Just to backtrack a bit. So that Friday, really special day. And folks, I'm just going to go ahead and throw in the pitch here that, you know, Lost Battalion Tours can provide this very experience, right? Like, is that shameless enough, Rob?
Yeah, you too can suffer something of what the Doughboys did, and we can ensure that for you.
We can make it as bad as you like, folks. But but the day began where we met up with some French and Dutch friends in the center of Binarville, which you guys have heard on the podcast. Binarville was eventually captured by the American 368th Infantry, along with some French units. Now Binarville is just to the west of the western edge of the Argonne Forest. So and it is just, what is it, like just southwest of Charlevoix Ravine. So it was a good place for us to meet. From there, once everybody was together, we just drove into the Argonne Forest, and we met up we started our walk at a hill that those of you familiar with the podcast will know is L'Homme Mort, which is the site of Charles Whittlesey's small pocket. Now, Rob, what was the reason why we were there? There's a very special thing going on that day, and it's really amazing that we all got to be a part of that. So I think I ever did, because we're friends and I'm rude. But I really appreciate that we got to be a part of that.
Yeah, like I said in the beginning, most people know that I'm the Lost Battalion guy, and that means that there's a lot of stuff that I've had access to over the years. I've been researching the Lost Battalion for better than 25 years now. So we've had access to a lot of things. And one of the things that came to light some years ago that really made the difference in my book, as well as the very first book that was written on the Lost Battalion in 1938, was this diary right here. This is the diary of a guy by the name of James Larney. Jim Larney was Whittlesey's signalman. He's the guy who carried the big panels that they laid on the ground to signal the aircraft. And he was by Whittlesey's side through the entire battle. He trained with Whittlesey at Camp Upton, went overseas, was with him on the Vel, was with them in the Baccarat sector. And when they went into the Argonne, he stayed right with them. And he started the diary when he hit the shores in France. It was against the rules to have a diary, to keep a diary at the front. And he managed to keep it secret. And when during the Lost Battalion incident, Whittlesey saw him writing in the diary, because he continued to write this diary all the way through the entire battle. Whittlesey saw him writing in the diary, and instead of confiscating it, he looked at him and he said, I want you to keep writing in that. It'll make a good record of what happens here. The only part that Whittlesey left out was in case we don't get out. And it has become one of the most poignant records of what happened. He kept detailed notes of every day that they were there, of most of the actions in and before the Charlevoix Ravine, in the small pocket, moving up the Ravine d'Argonne and moving into the pocket after he got hit twice in the pocket, and they carted him out by ambulance. He went back to the field hospital La Chalade, where he was operated on the first time. The diary came home, and in the early 30s, Thomas Johnson, who wrote the first book on the Lost Battalion, got in touch with it and was given access to the diary. In conjunction with that, Larney's best friend in the pocket was a guy by the name of Walter Baldwin, who was in charge of the runners. And after Ben Gaedeke was killed, he became the 1st Battalion Sergeant Major. After the war, he wrote a manuscript of his own called "Was There Such a Thing in the Great World's War as a Lost Battalion?" And Tom Johnson, at the height of the Depression, 1932, bought that manuscript for $200. He bought the rights to the manuscript. That manuscript and the diary became the basis for the 1938 Lost Battalion book. Now, Johnson took quite a few liberties with the stuff that was in there for some very good reasons. There's a lot of dirt in there on specific people who didn't exactly, hold up the best and brightest image of America, or some people who just couldn't take it.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to save some people from embarrassment, in order to keep other people from suing him for libel, Johnson changed a lot of things, which, by and large, the book still told the story in a general way. Larney himself didn't care for the changes, and we were lucky enough to get a hold of his copy of the 1938 book, where he had written in the margins everything that was wrong with it.
Wow.
And between that book and the diary here, we come up with a really clear view of what he saw. And since he was next to Whittlesey, he had the dirt on, the straight scoop on everything. I had access to the diary when I was writing my book, but I had access to transcriptions that were made by Larney's son, John. John would never let the diary out of his possession, and with good reason. I mean, it's a precious family heirloom.
Mm-hmm.
It's irreplaceable. The information in it is second to none. But John provided me with transcriptions of the most poignant episodes, the stuff that he could make out. Now, you must remember he had this in his pocket the whole time. So there are some places where the rain and the mud got to it. He had it in his pocket when he was hit. He had it in his pocket when he went through, the medical situation behind the lines. So it's pretty beat, and it was wet more than once. So he made out what he could. And when John died a few years ago, I was always kind of touched after my book came out. When you write a book, especially something like that, and you weren't there, you always wonder, did I do a good enough job? Did I really tell the story? Did I get it right? And I remember one night I got an email from John Larney. He had read my book, and he said, my dad would have approved, and he would have been proud of what you've done. And after that, I went up to bed with my wife, and I laid down and I told her, I'm not allowed to question the book anymore. So you can't get better than that, I think, as far as endorsement goes. John died a few years ago of cancer. I stayed in contact with his family on and off. And they had to search for his diary. He had it hidden. And the family had to search for it. They found it in the back of a filing cabinet out in the garage.
Oh.
So his widow has it, and she's taken really good care of it. I got in contact with his granddaughter through the Facebook page that we have, Finding the Lost Battalion Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the offer that I would like to transcribe the whole diary before it falls apart, before it's irreadable, unreadable and stuff. And they agreed that would be a good idea. Let's get everything down, photograph the entire thing, transcribe the entire thing. It's a great family heirloom. So we made arrangements to have it shipped from Watertown, New York to Wisconsin. It was heavily insured, and we followed it for 2 days while it was in transit. We kept a real close watch, and there was a lot of sweat when it got here. we were very pleased, and I started photographing it. We happened to mention to her one night online that we would be going back to France when we had the details for the Doughboy MIA mission hammered out. And her husband actually said, wouldn't it be a great idea if they took the diary back to France, where it was sort of born, go back to those places and bring the diary back there? I was pretty much floored by the idea. So we worked out the details, and with the blessing of the family, that's exactly what we did. We brought the diary back to the Vel, to the Argonne. We shipped it over in its own special case. It's waterproof and pretty sturdy. Nothing was going to happen to the diary. And it made it there and back again for the second time, 103 years after it went the first time. And it was very poignant to stand in the places that Jim Larney was when he wrote the diary, when he set all this down, particularly in the pocket, because he was right next to Whittlesey the whole 5 days. And when the artillery barrage came in on the 4th, he was right there. He knows exactly what Whittlesey said, how he acted, what he did. The same thing with the surrender letter. When the surrender letter came in on the 7th, did Whittlesey actually say, go to hell? No, he didn't. We know this for a fact because Larney was standing right there, and he saw the whole thing. And he wrote it at the time, not days later, not weeks later, at the time. So it was a wonderful experience to bring it back and to be able to share it with, Mike, yourself, and Alexander, and some of the other fellows that came with us. They got to see it there. It's a really poignant moment. And as the ultimate Lost Battalion geek, I mean, what could be better?
Yeah. So, what an absolute gift that that you could shepherd it back, take it on a walk where like you said, like where it was born, and that we, Alex and I and the others, that we could all be there for it. So that's pretty amazing. Folks, if you look on Instagram and on the Facebook page, I think on Twitter too, I've posted a picture of Jim Larney in his younger days as a soldier, and then the diary in Rob's hands in the Argonne Forest. So really something else. So that just made for an amazing day, folks. So like I said, we started at the small pocket where Whittlesey and his troops were surrounded for about 2 days at the end of September. And then we walked up the Havane d'Argonne, which they have they have like a logging road there, so it's somewhat easy. But it has been raining. It's been, like I said, it was a wet Argonne day, so the mud was very muddy.
Significant.
It was significant.
That's why you have that keyword, somewhat easy.
yeah. So that was quite an experience, and it's really something to walk through the woods. And I've recognized that, like when I'm just going to go off to the side here. So like when a tree falls in the woods, and it rips out the roots, it leaves a crater, and then the dirt eventually falls off the roots, and it creates like what's called a pillow and a cradle. So whenever I take a walk in the woods here in Massachusetts and I see those holes, I'm like, my first thought is always like, oh, those kind of look like shell holes, but they're not, because there's another mound of dirt right next to them. It's different in the Argonne Forest, folks. When you see a hole in the woods, an unnatural depression, they tend to be very round, they're large. Those are not naturally made. Those are not from fallen trees. Those are shell holes. And it's really like, if you look around, you can still very much see the effects of World War I on the land. And there are other effects as well, which Alex could tell us about on Cornwallis Hill, a little gift that nature brought up for him.
So when I went to Cornwall, I tried to take an accurate walk of what the 3/16th would have taken from their jump off line. So I started from Mulville Farm, excuse me. I went north, I cut across the left a little bit, and that found me right at the bottom of the hill. And then from the bottom of the hill, I took my walk up the hill. Of course, going up, I look to my left. Here's a Mauser cartridge. I walk a few more feet. Here's a German undergarment button. I go up the hill some more. I'm taking a break, trying to catch my breath, and I look to my right. There's a cap for a German stick grenade. So it's 103 years later, and it's still relevant to this area. You can't deny, it was not here, because here we are 103 years later and stuff is still on the surface. I finally made it to the top. And of course I look over and there's a dud just sitting right on the top of the hill. So that was a little scary. It was my first dud that I saw, but yeah, there's, the earth is just giving back so much. I mean, even for, the battle on this hill only lasted 3 days, but just to think of all the material that, was left on this hill and is still 103 years later coming to the top. It was definitely mind-boggling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly pretty sobering. Yeah, I mean, to encounter an artillery shell. But it's also, like, wow, like the amount of material, when we talk about, thousands of shells probably pounded into this hill, like that's one of them, like that's still around. So very much, yeah, French farmers in that area, French residents in that area, like they do live with that ever-present reminder. I know that they have their ways of dealing with it. They have the demineur teams that will come and take that stuff away. But man, what an extra like layer to life out in that area that you have to always consider. Yeah. Now, Alex, since we have you here talking, so this was your first trip to France. So what are some of your experiences, some of your observations? Like, what was it like, man? Especially like pretty amazing, like that you went in the middle of an ongoing pandemic, still saw your way there. So
the pandemic definitely made things a little more tricky, I would say. You have to have a COVID pass from the French government, either showing proof of being vaccinated or showing proof of recovering from COVID within the last 3 months.
Yep.
So I didn't get my COVID pass until maybe 2 days before. So I was very happy. I had put in for it 2 months ago, but I got it just in time. But my experience to France, it was I loved it. It was it was my first time really traveling. And I was outside of the country. I was in a complete different area I've never been to. I don't speak the language. It was definitely eye-opening. I definitely need to practice some more French for sure.
Oh yeah.
But overall, it was a beautiful trip. It's a beautiful country, beautiful area in the Meuse. Fantastic food. The food was excellent. I was lucky enough to spend the last couple of days of my trip with my dear friend Manon in Arras, and we had traditional northern French food. We had a fantastic dish called Welsh, which is it's a bread base with ham, tons of cheese, and an egg on top. And I had some of the best food I've ever had in my life there in France. So that was definitely a plus, definitely. And the people were very nice. It was a great experience. Very
awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear it, man. I'm glad to hear you had such a good time. And oh my God, that dish, I've got to look that up.
Yes. If you're ever in Arras, I highly suggest getting Welsh. It was
Welsh. Okay. Awesome. Cool. Rob, I know this is, not your first time over there, but still, man, what was it like being back after, I think 3 years for you?
Yeah, it's 7th or 8th time over. We spend quite a bit of time, moving between the salient, the British area up around Ypres, and then on down into the Argonne area and covering what, America did, where America fought.
Mhm.
I hadn't been there in 10 years. By the time we went over in 2018, the last time I'd been was on the 90th anniversary in 08. And then I went over in 18 for 3 weeks, leading tours with the Center for Military History for the U.S. Army, and then a couple of private tours, a couple of weeks of private tours. It was an eye-opening experience to see how much it changed. Now we go back 3 years later, and even more it changed. I was very shocked at how much things had grown up, how many changes there had been. They have KFC in France now, which really? Okay. We used to joke that the French gave us fantastic wine and cheese and art and music, and we gave them McDonald's, and now we've given them, KFC and Starbucks. Starbucks was in Paris. That's okay. And then moving into the Argonne, things never change in the Argonne itself. And I think, Mike, you can attest to this. Nothing ever changes. They're pretty much the same. I think that's a good thing, because the flavor of the area stays the same. They still remember what Americans have done over there, what they did 100 years ago. They never forget, and they're always appreciative.
Yeah, definitely.
It wasn't until we got to Verdun and we saw the big changes. Verdun's grown up quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much it. Alex found his first shell. That's always an experience, your first time coming across unexploded ordnance. I have a great story that I tell about my wife, the first time she came across unexploded ordnance, and after that never went in the forest again. Once you see it and you become accustomed to it, then you begin to see it everywhere, and you begin to realize how much of it there is still left over 100 years later. And there's a lot.
Yes.
The estimate is that 60 tons of junk comes up every year along the Western Front, that the earth just vomits up all this stuff that's left over. And they say that it'll be going on for at least another 100 years. Some of it is extremely dangerous. Some of it is, a little more innocuous. Cartridge casings, you find a lot of those, a lot of shrapnel.
Yep.
A lot of shrapnel balls, shell splinters, things like that. I can recall in 18, wandering into the woods off of a trail, to take a leak, basically. And I happened to look down, and there's a shell laying there right at my feet that was a shrapnel shell that had gone off, so it wasn't live.
Yep.
But this stuff's just laying there. My son came along with us, and he was photographing the whole thing and recording everything on video. He was very interested in seeing this stuff firsthand. He'd heard me talking about it all these years. Then he got to see it firsthand, and it tightens you up a little bit to see that stuff laying there. I know that there's a hand grenade that's in the pocket that in 2018, it came rolling down the hill. It got dislodged and came rolling down the hill. And that was a little nerve-wracking then. And we made sure that it got put into a place where it wasn't going to do any harm. So everybody got to see that again. And it can put you on edge, even if you've been there before and you've seen it before. In 18, I had a baseball cap on, and an acorn fell off a tree and hit the bill of my baseball cap. And I jumped about 18 feet in the air. It scared the daylights out of me. And then when you look, they're doing a lot of logging over there because of the tree beetle problem.
Yep.
You see those logs laying there on the side, and you see the red marks where they had to wand the log before they dig into it with a chainsaw to try to find the shrapnel and the shell splinters that are still stuck in the logs. And then you see them cut the logs on, and you can see it in there. And they call these witness trees or legacy trees. These were there during the battle. So that was an eye-opening experience to see a lot of that stuff down and to see the trenches and the pillboxes.
Yep.
And the stuff that's still out there that you wouldn't ordinarily get to see because there was far too much vegetation. It's very poignant. It's very poignant. There's a cemetery outside of Aprimo that if you didn't know it was there before, you would miss it. It was an evacuated German cemetery. Now you drive past it and there's the walls are right there. And, the gates are right there. You can see the whole thing.
Yeah. Yep, exactly that. Yeah, that's a very poignant sight, and it's wild to see the pictures of that cemetery previously sitting in the amongst the trees, and now it's wide open. It's a little sad to see the Argonne Forest that way, but I mean, these are the acts of nature. The Argonne parts of the Argonne Forest folks are currently experiencing a bark beetle infestation that's been going on for a couple of years. So some pretty large chunks of the forest have been cut down because those trees are diseased and ruined. So
they're doing their best to stop it. They had started it. They had just started it when we were there in 2018. And there were some things that have been taken down, but they didn't realize the extent of it until just a couple of years ago when they started to go to town full swing. And there's huge sections that are just completely gone. It is sad because it's a beautiful forest.
Yes.
I grew up in northern Wisconsin, and my son even mentioned, wow, this looks a lot like up north. We call it up north here in Wisconsin. He said, it looks a lot like the Nicolet National Forest. And he says, I feel like we're at home in some sections. And then you look down and you see an unexploded shell and you go, oh, yep, we're not at home.
Not at home.
Very much no. Very much no. Yeah, folks. So this is like, really awesome to be back in the Meuse Argonne. Very, very grateful, especially to spend the time with Rob and his kids. I brought my daughter, Alex, other folks, Michiel, Martin, Christoph, all the folks who came out and joined us. It was an excellent time. Really great to connect back with the land. It is a cold area. It's wet. It's raw. Just bundle up. It is what it is. But I mean, you just know that even while you're out there shivering and freezing, you will be experiencing exactly what the Doughboys also experienced. So you can, I suppose that's cold comfort, but
Well, and it's about taking away experiences too. And I think I think that some of the experiences that I'll always remember this. The one that will stick with me for the longest is the look on Alex's face as he stood next to that area where we believe his relative is buried.
Yes.
And he stood next to the building in which his relative died. Those are the kind of things that when you get into the Doughboy MIA work, that kind of makes it all worthwhile, because you can see that the work actually does touch people. When you read through the burial case files and you read enough of them and you read enough of those letters from the families where they're saying, can't you tell me anything about my loved one, anything about them? Where did they go? They're just heartbreaking, and it can really tear you up. And then you see someone 103 years later, who never met this individual, but cares enough, and see the look in their face and the tear in their eye as they're standing in that area, and you helped bring that about. I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then I got to meet Martin Ott, and I have been trying to meet Martin Ott for years, and we just never managed to cross paths. He's a tremendous individual. And I was very heartened to find out that the two of us have so much in common, not just World War I, but music as well and things. It was a wonderful experience being able to spend some time with him. Just a fantastic individual. And it was great to get into the forest with you, Mike.
Yeah.
To be there, the two of us. We had planned Lost Battalion Tours. The first tour was put together, ready to go. And then COVID came, and that was the end of that.
Yes. So, and I think, I myself definitely thought, like, wow, we've sold this thing out. by word of mouth.
In
Everything
6
is
weeks.
awesome. In 6 weeks, what could possibly go wrong? And we very quickly found out. So, but
Yeah.
hey, 2022 is going to be the year, folks. We're getting back out there. So I you know, with everything willing, the situation, you know, pandemic starts to clear out. We definitely want to get you folks out there. So that's our plan.
That is our goal.
We're gonna will it.
Travel isn't easy. Yeah, I mean, travel is not necessarily easy. Travel is never easy overseas, but there's just a couple extra steps now.
That's all.
Alexander mentioned the sanitary pass you have to have for the French. Mine arrived the day before we left, so I was getting a little bit nervous there. And then you get over there and you find out that, yeah, they're actually asking for this thing, and they asked for it quite a bit. And then you find out that you have to have a PCR test to leave, to get back into the US. You have to make arrangements for that. I think the biggest takeaway about going over to France and back this time is that we had to roll with the punches. There was different things that had to happen, and some of it we couldn't plan ahead for. We had to wait till we got there to figure it out. And that is not always necessarily a comforting feeling. You want to have everything all tied together in a nice, neat bow, but you can't.
Nope.
I think that we're seeing the end of that, though. I think we've had enough time now where everybody world over is beginning to tie the ends together. Okay, this is how it has to be. This is what we're going to do. So,
yeah, hopefully. Now, I won't take up too much more of you gentlemen's time, but I kind of want to end this on a bit of a lighter note. Now, I think Rob's going to very quickly figure out where this question's going. And Alex, you might be in to chip on in this too. Now, I have heard that the AEF, you know, they sent over, I think about 22 divisions fought in the Meuse-Argonne. I have heard, rumor tells me, ABMC tells me that the 5th Division was in the Meuse-Argonne.
you sure?
No comment.
Are you
Yeah,
sure?
are we able to confirm that was the 5th actually there? I mean, how do we know? What proof do we have?
Who knows? I mean, you know, outside of the fact that, you know, there's only 37 monuments, you know, every 100 feet you run into one. Other than that, I'm not sure the 5th was there at all.
Yeah, so folks, this has been a bit of an inside joke here for a while, and I've come late to this joke, and it's nothing against the 5th Division. Yes, the 5th Division AEF was in the Meuse-Argonne, and they fought very well. And in the last days of the war, they did participate. They put in their full measure. However, unlike other divisions, they left these white obelisks with a red diamond, the divisional symbol, on them pretty much everywhere they stopped. So I mean, you can't, I mean, you look.
Can't swing a dead cat in France without hitting one. When we stayed in Dun-sur-Meuse, and
it's about 10 right there. So.
In town, and then within 5 kilometers, there were 3 more along the roadway.
It's true. It's true.
I didn't find out until, as a matter of fact, this year that I actually had a relative in World War I who was in the 5th Division. So
just makes it just the best.
It does. The irony is just crushing. So we had to stop and take a picture of one of the 5th Division memorials so I can prove once and for all, yes, the 5th actually was in France.
Yes,
so
they were. They very much were. There's no missing it, folks. So that's awesome. So gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time out of a Sunday evening. Thank you, God, man, thank you both for coming out to France, for meeting up, being part of this amazing mission. I mean, it's really something to be a part of this, to account for our doughboys, to be a part of the Lost Battalion walk with Jim Larney's diary, but also just Rob, we've known each other for a while, so it's awesome to hang out with you. Alex, it's the first time we met, but fantastic. I feel like you're instantly like one of us. Like you were just,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, really great to
means
meet.
a lot. I mean, it's been great working with the both of you for the last couple of years. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you
Awesome.
guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
And
Next
thank
summer.
you. Thanks for having me on here. It's been quite a plot twist for me. I've always been listening to the podcast, so to finally be here, it's a little different for me, but it's awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much. And we'll be in touch. And folks, as things develop with Doughboy MIA and with Lost Battalion Tours, you guys will, we will be putting it out there in the social media world. So, all right, gentlemen, have a good evening.
You as well, sir. Thank you.
If you'll just
Take care.
stay with me.